Hey friends, it's December. I can't believe that it is already December. It has been a month. Holy, has it been a month? You might have noticed that I didn't post a lot of videos on here, and that's because there was a lot of external stuff going on in life, in the world, and I've just been taking my time to sort of process it, go through the motions, and go through all of it. So I managed to read 10 books in the month of November. I also started 3 books that I didn't finish, but I will mention those at the end. But let's jump into all of the books that I read in the month of November. So the first book that I read, I had actually started in the month of October, and that was The Ever Queen, which was the follow-up to The Ever King by L.J. Andrews. This is a fun pirate romantasy. I liked this. It's not one that I think will crack my top 5 romantases that I've read of this year, but it was enjoyable. I really like the way that L.J. Andrews built and fleshed out the world. I liked the way in which the Fae in this world have different abilities, have different realms. It all came together quite nicely. The duology, I think, is good as a duology. I like when authors know that 2 books is enough as opposed to making it a prolonged series and into too many books, because I feel like we have too many of those in fantasy right now. But I thought this was a really good, fun read, but I then jettisoned into something completely different, and that was because with Kyle from Read by Kyle, he had told me in terms of audiobooks, an audiobook that I absolutely had to listen to was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and I had a good time with this. Kyle can attest to the fact that I am overly nitpicky when it comes to certain books, and I don't know why this is with certain genres. I feel like I place a higher expectation on them to be accurate and correct, and sci-fi is one of those things that I do this with. It's also the same with historical fiction. I'm very particular in what I like and what I do not like, and I found that there were aspects about Project Hail Mary that I really did enjoy. I do think that the audiobook narration is very well done. I liked the story. It wasn't my favorite thing that I've ever read. I also have not read The Martian by Andy Weir, which I think is most people's favorites. There is a twist in Project Hail Mary, which is interesting, and I like that dynamic in the story. I will say I think the beginning of the book is really strong, and I wish that I would have had more time with that. That's pretty much all I'm going to say about Project Hail Mary. So the next 2 books that I read were by Stacey McEwen. Stacey McEwen is absolutely an hysterical author. If you're not following her on social media, please go follow her. She is an Australian romantasy author, and she is arguably, I think, the funniest person on the internet. Her videos are always spot on. They're always on topic, and I really, really enjoy them. But she has a trilogy called the Glacian Trilogy, and as I've mentioned previously, I'm in a book club with 2 of my best friends. We decided, aka they decided, that we were gonna read book 2 of this trilogy because they had already read book 1. So that meant that I needed to read books 1 and 2 this month. So that was Ledge, which was book 1, and Chasm, which was book 2. Ledge I thought was really interesting. I liked the concept. It is a group of people that are basically relegated to living on this ledge where the conditions are absolutely dire. There is nothing for them. The only sustenance that they really have is food that's dropped off by this kingdom of these people called the Ascended, and they are then chosen at random every year as part of a selection, and no one really knows what happens to the people that of course get selected. So naturally the protagonist gets selected, and the story kind of takes off from there. I can't say much about the sequel because it is then going to enter and veer into spoiler territory, but I will say I thought the first book was stronger than the second book. I think that she does a good job at introducing the world in book 1. I was really interested and fascinated by it, and I like the side characters that she wrote into the story, especially in book 2. I'm curious to see how the trilogy ends, but it's not one that I am like yearning to jump into so much right now. I will say book 3 is one of the books that I started in November and didn't finish, and it's just because I felt like it was okay to take a pause with it. But it is a romantasy that was written in 3rd person. I've really become used to reading in 1st person for romantasy, so that was an interesting change. I didn't dislike that. I actually didn't mind it at all. But I like her style of writing. It was interesting having known her from her videos and the way that she talks and her cadence and her style of speaking and how vastly different I felt it to be from her writing. Not to say that one is better than the other, they're just different. I then read a 4-book completed series and then a 5th book kind of addendum to said series. And I am so sorry that I am most likely going to mispronounce her name, but this is The Legends of Thesmar by Helen Scheuer, I believe is how you say her name. I've looked it up, so I think this is how you say it. And these books include Blood and Steel, Vows and Ruin. I've got the list here. Fate and Furies, Shadow and Storms are the 4 that are part of the proper series itself. And then the companion book is Slaying the Shadow Prince. I had a really fun time with these. I listened to all of these on audio. It was a dual narration. Basically, the first book, Blood and Steel, takes place from the perspective of Wilder Hawthorne and Althea. Thea desperately wants to be a war sword, and in Thesmar, women are prohibited from being a war sword because of a prophecy that is long-standing that if a woman is to wield a weapon, it will bring destruction upon the land. Naturally, you know, Thea is gonna go off and become a soldier, a trainer, like she's gonna be a fighter. And that's pretty much exactly what happens. But I really enjoyed the dynamic in this world. I really liked the banter between Wilder and Thea. Wilder is, of course, a war sword. He's broody, he is grumpy, as opposed to Thea, who's kind of sunshiny. The thing that's also really interesting about Thea that you learn about at the very beginning of the book is she has something called a fate stone, in which she only has a few set years left to live. So she's got a lot to do in a short, condensed period of time. So I obviously liked this series enough that I just continued to breeze through it. And there's a character that you meet in the 4 books that then appears in Slaying the Shadow Prince. That's his book, Telomere, and I really enjoyed that one too. So all in all, Helen Scheuer, I had a great time. She has a companion series that is, I think, called The Ashes of Thesmar, coming out in January, book 1, and I'm excited to read that. I don't know if I'm going to read it right away because I liked being able, I'm such a binger with my series. I really liked being able to jump into the next book right away, and of course I'm not going to be able to do that with book 1 coming out in January, so we'll see. But I am really eager and excited to see what happens, so I might not be able to stop myself. I might just have to jump in and read. The last book that I officially read and finished in the month of November that we need to talk about is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and I have been sitting on this for a really long time. Multiple people have told me that I need to read this book, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I had myself sobbing by the time I got to the end of it. Also, I didn't know that Julia Whelan was the narrator for this book. And if you guys know me, I love Julia Whelan. I love Julia Whelan's narration so much. She brings stories to life in a way that I wish I was able to do. But Addie LaRue is a young girl in the 1700s who does not want to live a life where she is basically born, lives, and dies in the same small village. She is being forced into a marriage that she does not want to be into, and therefore runs into the woods and makes a deal with a god that will allow her freedom. But this freedom comes at the cost that no one remembers who she is. And she basically gets eternal life, but she has to live life as a ghost. And of course, 300 years have passed and no one has remembered Addie and who she is until someone does. And this book, I loved it. I understand that there could be some problems with this book for people. I have I have watched quite a few reviews that people had for it since finishing the book to see what other people's perceptions were of it. And I know that there are some questions of why Addie didn't travel to certain places in those 300 years or encounter certain groups of people. And I think those are all valid points. But for me, I just loved the juxtaposition with time and place and setting. And I really loved the prose in this book. I thought they were beautiful. I loved it. I loved it so much. It gave me the worst book hangover. So honestly, like, such a phenomenal book. I loved it. I don't know if I will be able to ever read it again just because it was so moving. And at the same time too, like, I just can't stop thinking about it. So there's that. The other 2 books that I started but I didn't finish in the month of November, one book is The Leviathan Wakes, which is book 1 of The Expanse, which I'm still working my way through for the Fantasy Awash with Laura and Josh book club. And the second one is The Lost God by Sheila Masterson, which is book 1 of the Lost God series, which is an indie published 4-book series that completed this year. So it's been a good reading month for me. I enjoyed pretty much everything that I read. I think the thing that I gave the lowest star was like 4 stars and or 3 stars, yeah, and that was Chasm. So I mean, like, all in all, a really good reading month. And even then, like, I'm not really giving stars to things anymore. It's just kind of how I feel about them at the end of it when I have time to reflect about the whole thing. But all in all, a really good month. If you watched my last month's video, you knew that there was some health stuff going on. It's still there. It's why I haven't really been around a whole lot. I've been struggling pretty badly for the last month, and it hasn't been fun. But other than that, like, not a whole lot is going on, except this week, my cover reveal video will be dropping on Tuesday, December 2nd. So I am super excited about that, to share that with you. If that's something that you are interested in, please be sure to check it out on Tuesday. All in all, though, nothing too much else is going on here. If you'd like to catch up with me, feel free to shoot me a message on Instagram and we can chat there. You can always follow me on Instagram, TikTok. You can help support the channel if you want to by hitting like and subscribe. And if you want to go that extra mile with helping to support the channel, there's always Patreon, but that's not, of course, mandatory. So as always, I hope you had a wonderful month. Stay kind, stay healthy, and I will see you next time. Bye.